Hello, everybody. Ian Barkin here. For those who were expecting us 15 minutes ago, good old technical challenges, the joys of live TV. But we are back. We took a bye week. We took a week off from one take live streams last week, but we are back and better than ever. I hope everyone is healthy and well wherever you're dialing in or calling in or linking in from around the world. And as I'd like to remind everyone on every show that I begin, if you do find yourself out of work, please do check out jobs.sykes.com. We are always hiring. We've got a great work at home capability where people can work from home and help us serve our world-class brands that we support. So jobs.sykes.com. And with that, we'll get on with the show. There are so many major trends that are impacting the world of work, the future of work, the whatever we're calling it now, the new normal or something. And many of those trends have been covered by a few really established and unique experts. I'm thrilled that my guest today is one of those experts. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Mary Lassity to One Take. So the future of work, all of these major sort of trends and new ways of doing things, you have been at the forefront of covering so very many of them. And the plan is to sort of walk through some of those and through sort of your career trajectory over the course of the next many minutes. So before any questions from me, tell us about yourself. What was your background? What inspired you to get started in the field that you're in? And then we'll sort of riff from there.
Okay. How far back do you want me to go, Ian?
I was born. Okay, so let's see. Well, so I'll set it up. So sorry, usually I'm better at this, but the technical things threw me off. So I'll start with now. So right now, you are the Walton Professor of Information Systems and the Director of the Blockchain Center of Excellence at the University of Arkansas in their business school called the Sam W. Walton College of Business.
Yes.
For those who aren't familiar with Sam W. Walton, Walmart, who has a more complex supply chain than Walmart. So what an outstanding place to be looking at blockchain. So that's what you're doing now, but you have covered outsourcing, you've covered RPA, and you have a background in really information systems and quantitative research. So I guess, start from really the college, I suppose. What did you want to be when you grew up, and why did you follow the course of study you did?
Sure. Okay. Well, in my undergraduate, I had an aspiration to mathematically model the universe because I was naive enough to think that that was possible. And then I realized that the world was emergent and not deterministic. And so I ended up essentially being an organizational storyteller. My dissertation back in 1992 was on this really strange idea called outsourcing. And I got really interested in the topic because it made no sense to me. We were looking at those big early mega deals where they were promising 50% cost savings, but they weren't going to fire any employees and they were going to take over the assets. And I thought, this doesn't make any sense to me. And that's when I started to study the phenomenon. And I had the pleasure of working with Denny McGuire at Technology Partners International, which was a very influential consulting firm. So that kept me engaged. Outsourcing kept me engaged for the next 25 years because, as you well know, it just kept morphing. Started domestic sourcing, and then we started doing offshore sourcing, and then we started looking at impact sourcing and prison sourcing and rural sourcing and every other kind of ilk. And probably about 4 or 5 years ago, it became abundantly clear to me and to my co-author, Professor Leslie Wilcox, that automation of services was going to completely transform the delivery of services. And that's when we pivoted to looking at automation technologies like RPA and cognitive automation tools. And then about 4 years ago, I was convinced blockchains was going to bring us an internet of value and a completely different infrastructure in addition to the internet. And so that's what I've been studying for the last 4 years.
Outstanding. And like I said at the beginning, you have had the foresight and I guess just the proximity to see these trends coming and to get involved in studying them, working with leading enterprises, leading experts like Professor Leslie Wilcox from London School of Economics to cover these. I have some visuals for the show. You knew I was going to do this to you. Sadly, so I think if the number is correct in my research, you've written 29 books now. Is that roughly right?
I don't even count anymore, Ian.
Okay.
I'll go with that. That's fine.
So my guest has written over 1,000 books, ladies and gentlemen. And some of them I have on my bookshelves, and some of them I don't, and I'll explain why. But so one of them is, and I got to pick the right angle, 9 Keys to World-Class BPO, Business Process Outsourcing. This one, and you wrote it in 2015. As you said, the sort of the lessons you learned and the key success criteria that you set out in this inspired me. I think are as fresh today as they were 5-6 years ago when you wrote it. And so I guess I'll start there. Have you seen enterprises pick up on the lessons of how to run good outsourcing? Are they evolving now as a result of all the challenges we're facing, or do you constantly need to remind enterprises, go back to the fundamentals and the basics to get that right before you start to play with newfangled technology like RPA or blockchain?
Oh no, I think that book actually still informs our work today, because essentially what that book found was that a lot of the success of any of this is about relationships. And so still some of my favorite chapters in there is looking at the leaderships that you have to have in a client and a provider organization, the commitments they have to make, how they have to develop their relational governance in addition to their contractual governance. And Ian, what's so amazing is we're really only studying pairs, right? An outsourcing client and an outsourcing provider. Blow that up to an ecosystem, and that's what we're dealing with blockchains. Because these are shared ecosystem applications where you might start off with 7 partners that balloon to 20, that balloon to 50. And so some of those lessons on just how you manage just a duo just go on steroids when you're trying to talk about developing shared applications for ecosystems. So yeah, we still love that book. I don't believe that the world it can be just put into different buckets. So when you say are organizations still needing to learn the lessons, some do, some have mastered it. But I will tell you, our research approach really is looking at leaders and learning lessons from them. So we don't create practices that are unfounded, right? We've shown that organizations, if they do all these practices, or we call them action principles, can get good business value if things are managed well. And it's always if things are managed well, right?
Caveat. Yep. Right. Love it. Okay, so you're jumping to full complex ecosystems. Let's take a journey. Yeah, let's take a journey through. And before I do, I will remind myself of live stream best practice, which I'm constantly forgetting. But if you are joining us, I do welcome you to share your name, where you're joining us from, and please do ask Mary questions. Like I said, you have got the absolute resource here. And I'll go back into some other roles that you've played and research you've done. But okay, so we've got BPO and outsourcing in general, leveraging and tapping into talented humans wherever they may be, within your own company or near your company or living far away from your company, but still very capable. And then you are on the forefront of the adoption of automation as a way to augment those humans. And that came in the form of, these are some more books I have. So that came in the form of this one you wrote in 2016. That was the
first one in the RPA series. Yep.
Service Automation, Robots and Future of Work. Followed by this one in 2017. I have that one too. This is the Risk Mitigation. And then I think there was another one that I don't have, and I'll explain why. And then most recently, in 2019, this was the Becoming Strategic with RPA book, which self-plug, I suppose. I had the privilege of writing the foreword to.
Yes.
But you have, as you said, you've worked with experts. You've seen enterprises try to expand the ecosystem, I suppose, by not only using their own teams and third-party teams, but now employing this sort of digital team as well that sometimes comes from their own internal operations and configuration, and sometimes comes from a third party that does it for them. The principles from this one still stood true. And enterprises adapting well, or what do you think about that?
I would say everything's lumpy, right? So, I think a good general rule is maybe 20% of organizations do things really well and get what we call a triple win of value. They get a value for the company, they get a value for their employees, they get a value for their clients.
Yeah.
And then the middle, maybe 60%, do some things well, some things not so well. And then you just have this, maybe 20% that just fail and fail from the start. So it's not a uniform story.
Perfect. Okay. Want to quickly say hello to Hamza from Marrakesh, Thomas from Poland, who says really impressive book. Thomas, I don't even know which one you're talking about, but I'll assume it's the last one where you posted the comment right about when we were talking about that. Shajoy from India. Hello. Mark Barrett from London. AJ. Hey, AJ. How are you?
Hi, AJ.
Friend of both Mary and me. Thanks so much for listening. Katrina, who celebrates the success that we actually got on the live stream and you can actually hear us both. So that was nice. Thank you. And thank you, John Yarlett, for saying hi and letting us know it's all working now too. Okay. So you're rocking and rolling in RPA. You're writing all of the visionary books about, first of all, what it is, and then the risks you need to mitigate in deploying it, how to deal with and hopefully avoid the lumpiness, and then truly going strategic with the space. But that's just not good enough for you. So you got to find something else. So how did you stumble upon blockchain, and what was your initial reaction to it? And then I'll actually ask you, because you are the world expert in it, to define it for us too, because I'm sure everyone says blockchain, that's Bitcoin, right? And I'm sure that creates it. So I guess get us to the blockchain thing, and then let's talk about what that is.
Okay, I'm going to back up because there was a story I wanted to share. Now that AJ Hanna, I know, is out there, because I really want to give a shout out to him. One of the things when a new trend comes up, and is it hype, can you really get business value out of it, is we look for early organizational adopters that have already deployed and gotten business value. And AJ Hanna was one of the first people I met in this space in December of 2014 when he was working at Ascension with Lee Coulter. And they became one of our early case studies in RPA. And I'm telling you this because you then asked, how did I get into blockchains? So I was in San Francisco at an HFS event. You were there. And I'm out to dinner with all of you guys. And Lee Coulter was sitting next to me. And he said, what do you think of blockchains? And it was May of 2016. And I said, what's a blockchain? And I think you were sitting across from me, and he drew it on a little napkin.
Yep.
And
I was at that dinner.
Really intrigued. I went and read Don Tapscott, now at Tapscott's book that had just come out. And then I called my department chair when I was at the University of Missouri. And I said, I don't know anything about blockchains. Can I teach it in the fall? Right. So that's what you can do as an academic in the summer. And so that's where I began my journey.
That's tremendous. And I was at that dinner in San Francisco, fond memories. And we had a funny cab ride back to our hotel too. We were passing various different establishments in San Francisco. That's for another live stream. And then, yes, I remember very shortly thereafter, you shared with me an initial deck, PowerPoint deck, where you had done some research, and it was just the beginnings. And this thing was like 200 plus slides long, with all the research you'd already done. And that was where I got to learn so much about blockchain, just from learning from you on your journey.
I'm going to give you a big secret, Ian, about faculty. When we don't know what we're doing, our work is this big. So if you hold up that first automation book, it's this thick.
Right.
It's this thick. And what's the second one? As you learn more, the second one was this thick. So when I shared with you the deck of 200, it's because I was still swimming in it. You can get smaller once you understand it better.
That's funny. Well, and so what I remember too, and this was I don't know, maybe this was as a result of, maybe I shouldn't admit this, but as a result of having been in the outsourcing space and having played with RPA and just being exposed to it myself, I was then at another, I think it was another HFS event where you were giving a presentation on blockchain. And I sort of sat there and maybe it's just my smug arrogance, I don't know, but I felt like I don't need to pull out a piece of paper. I don't need to write anything down here. I sort of know this stuff. And then you started talking, and I distinctly remember feeling like I was back in school, and I went scrambling for paper and pen to start writing things down because it was just so rich with your then intensely informed research about the early stage pilot initiatives and just the tinkering and the experimentation going on, and the different types of blockchains and where it really was going to play a role versus you didn't think it was necessarily mature enough yet. So I guess I'll pivot back to the second half of the question a while ago, which is what is blockchain?
Okay, I think it's a set of technologies is probably the best answer to that. And you said people immediately think of cryptocurrencies, right? That's kind of what they do, what they pivot to. But I think I hate answering the question, what is the technology? I think it's better to look at it from what does the technology enable? And so I think what we're trying to get to is an internet of value. So right now we have an internet of information. But what that means is we're sending copies of things to each other, right? So if you send me an email, I'm getting a copy of an email. You send me a picture, I'm getting a copy. When you're trying to get to an internet of value, Ian, you can't send me a copy of $1 and keep a copy. So what the set of blockchain technologies do, whether it's a distributed ledger, whether it's a smart contracts, whether it's tokenization, all of the cryptography, all of these layers of technology, what they're going to allow us to do is to be able to exchange value directly using technology rather than having to go through trusted third parties. And so that's kind of the bigger promise of what an internet of value is. It's I think that, and I just want to make also another little announcement because we just joined a huge initiative that's being managed by the Linux Foundation called the Trust Over IP Foundation. It's nonprofit, open source. And what we really need to do is put the missing layer to the internet in there. So when we started building the internet, all we did was enable one machine to talk to another machine, right? The IP addresses. Mm-hmm. We don't know the people, the objects, or the organizations behind those machines. So we don't have the identity layer. We don't have the trust layer. And so that's what we really need to get to, is to be able to know who are the individuals and their credentials in the organizations and make that a universal horizontal layer. And that will really help us enable a blockchain or an internet of value that's powered by blockchains.
Tremendous. So we'll put that information. We'll put link to your new book, to the books that we referenced in the show notes. One of the books that I wasn't able to reference, and we talked about this before the show, and the reason I couldn't, not that I don't have it, is just that I have it in my office, which I haven't been to in several months because we're working from home now, is your first work on blockchain, which was a manager's guide to blockchain for business. You have it right there. So if you want to show off,
this was written, it's 2 years old, which is about 1,000 years old in blockchain space. But the good news is I just finished the second book yesterday. Been writing nonstop for 4 months, and it's called Blockchain Foundations for the Internet of Value. And what's really fun about the new book is now we've got live deployments. So we're looking at enterprise adoptions primarily. Okay. And so we've got case studies of live deployments in financial services, in supply chains in particular, in credentialing, and in energy markets.
Outstanding. I look forward to getting my hands on that.
Yeah.
So you said you're writing for the last 4 months. The last 2-ish months, we've been facing a global pandemic that has really stressed and strained global supply chains. There are other trends that are going on right now in the form of major cyber events that are impacting companies where their data isn't as secure as perhaps they'd hoped it would be. I guess where to start with that question, but sort of what's been happening in the last few sort of weeks and months as you were writing the book that found its way into the book, or that you think would find its way into the next one, as far as the role that an internet of value will play in sort of a recovering post-COVID era?
Yes. Well, we actually just published something in the Harvard Business Review too on blockchains that are helping with the pandemic. And really, these are blockchains that have been in development for a very, very long time. It's not like you can instantly create a shared application, right? So these have actually been under development and just kind of been unleashed to address this particular problem. And in particular, it's the sharing of data. So one of the nice things about what blockchain enables you to do is a shared application where you have multiple parties that are updating data, and you can do that in a safe and trusted way. So one of our most interesting case studies in the book is in supply chain. And it was a company that was started, the idea started when it was Moog Aircraft, and it's now a startup called Veritex by Colonel James Regener. And for the last 4 or 5 years, he's developing a whole new market for additive manufacturing. So printing things where you need them, when you need them. It is blockchain enabled because you have to make sure that the printing instructions are not tamper proof, because he's doing things like developing parts for the Department of Defense, right? So there is blockchain technologies underneath it. But the bigger idea is really this idea of 3D printing and additive manufacturing. Sure. Well, Colonel Regener realized we have a shortage of ventilators, but we've got an abundance of sleep apnea machines. And it only takes a couple of printed parts to turn a sleep apnea machine into an industrial ventilator. And so he's doing that. He got unprecedented to contract very quickly. And those ventilators should be shipping next week to hospitals around America.
That's tremendous. That's a great story. What else? I suppose there's another question I want to get to around how people get involved in this major new trend. But before we finish up, are you seeing government initiatives right now, especially as it relates to, there is a sprint globally to coming up with a vaccine, and I would imagine, this is data that we hear others are trying to hack. I'm sure there's exchanges going on between government organizations and healthcare organizations. Is that a place that the blockchain technology can play a role and assist?
Well, China's the leader. Their government came out last year and said blockchain was going to be one of their major strategic thrusts. Okay. They've deployed over 20 blockchain-enabled solutions to address the pandemic. Some of those are something that may not be what we would subscribe to as our values. So a lot of this is being, unbelievable surveillance of their citizens. Right. And, blockchain, like any technology, it's how you deploy it. So one of our main messages in our Harvard Business Review article was that if you use blockchains correctly, you can share data and still protect personal privacy data, right? So you give the government and the decision makers, you give the healthcare the data they need, but you're not identifying the individuals. So that's that we're seeing kind of two different thrusts of how the technologies are being deployed.
Sure. Okay. So here's a question I think a lot of people who are watching this may ask, and especially there's a lot of just there's a lot of disruption going on in the world of work right now. We're seeing a lot of people racing to try to figure out what skills they need to develop and to gain for themselves to be relevant as transitions happen. We saw it in the last 5 years in the form of developing RPA configuration skills. Right? Those were somewhat easy. People with process modeling backgrounds or knew some software, or even were just sort of logically minded, could go and get trained in third-party software and become part of this army that's helping enterprises digitize. As this Internet of Value takes on a bigger meaning, as we move from early pilots to broader scale implementations of blockchain technologies, where do people go to learn the basic skills that they'd need to play a role in this new economy?
Well, I think a lot of our friends out there in the outsourcing world already have a lot of the most important skills, because the critical things that you really need to have is this idea of shared governance, right?
Okay.
So this is going to be things that are outside the boundaries of the firm. So what is that? Nothing more than outsourcing, right?
Yeah.
The idea of coopetition, where even with traditional competitors, you're going to have to compete on standards and helping identify how you're going to do platforms that kind of raise an entire industry up. So there's a lot of managerial aspects to this. So you don't even have to really understand much about the technology to be a critical player in helping with shared ecosystem solutions. If you are a developer and you do want to learn more, I mean, this is probably one of the most open communities you will ever find. So it's very easy to go out and you can get yourself trained in Hyperledger Fabric if you're interested in coding for enterprise systems, or learning Ethereum Solidity if you're interested in public solutions. So we're all lifelong learners, and there's no shortage of places to go to get educated. Of course, I'll also give a plug to the University of Arkansas, because we have full blockchain curriculum at both undergraduate and graduate levels. We have a 4-course sequence for a graduate certificate in enterprise blockchains.
That's tremendous. I do have to say, I have never had a guest on One Take say Hyperledger Fabric before, and I think we're going to require it from now on. I think, and I'm going to work that into my daily routine. It's just simply saying
I can give you a lot of terms.
Okay. Well, and so this is exactly why I started taking notes so aggressively when you started talking, because I just realized there is an entire vocabulary out there that I wasn't familiar with. I have to ask, what is a Hyperledger Fabric?
Okay, so this is actually it's just a code base that allows companies to create private blockchains. So this is typically there's 3 code bases that we see in enterprise adoptions. It's either a product called Corda that came out of an R3 consortium of financial services. Hyperledger Fabric was really developed by IBM, but they gave it to the Linux Foundation, so it's being managed as open source software. And the third one is called Quorum. It was really developed by JP Morgan, and again, given to the open source community, and it's the private version of public Ethereum. So I know these sound very confusing, but it's just a code base that people can very easily create and develop an enterprise blockchain solution.
Tremendous. Well, and I think that, again, just like the new vocabulary that enterprises needed to adopt in understanding their options presented to them with outsourcing, right? Is it a nearshore? Is it an offshore? Is it a front or a back office outsourcing arrangement? Move that forward. We digitize things. You're talking about RPA or RDA, assisted or autonomous automation. What is cognitive? What is intelligent automation? And it sounds like, very truly, there is this new blockchain vocabulary that enterprises and leadership really needs to at least appreciate, if not understand to some degree, to be having reasonable discussions, strategic discussions going forward, as far as how do they create those ecosystems with their partners, how do they create that internet of value, because that's how they're going to compete in the future. So
the technology is easy, Ian. You probably don't need leaders understanding the underlying technology. It's what you can do with the technology. I think that's the way more exciting play here.
Right. So what are your, I guess, the top 3 points of advice that you give? You spend a lot of time on stage. Obviously, you capture a lot of your findings in books and in articles. If we were talking to an executive, a C-suite, decision makers in organizations, what are the 3 things they need to do to be blockchain savvy and blockchain ready?
I don't even like that, because that's putting the technology first, right?
Beautiful.
So
okay.
I think a fair assessment is there's a set of technologies that can help remove the friction and the pain points in ecosystems. So whereas all the other software we look at, like we look at RPA, it's those decisions happen within the boundaries of the firm. You look at cognitive automation tools, those help you within the boundaries of the firm. But if you're trying to solve ecosystem problems with your trading partners and through your supply chains, this is a set of technologies that will allow you to confidentially and safely share data and execute agreements automatically. But it's an ecosystem solution. So I think the unit of analysis pivots.
Okay. Well, so there you have it. We will wrap up now. I have to say, thank you so much, Mary, for spending your time with us, for sharing the experiences that you have over the career you've had to date, about enlightening us in new and modern ways of innovating today.
Before you cut me off, though, I want to give you the bigger. I was going to give you the bigger picture for the C-suite.
Oh, please.
Okay.
Please.
So what do these technologies do? In supply chains, I think the most beautiful thing we see is it allows you to go from, the birth of an asset to the death of it. So if you're talking about food, going from farm to fork. If you're talking about fish, you're talking about going from bait to plate. If you're talking about diamonds, it's being able to trace from the mine to your finger. If you're talking about fine wines, it's being able to trace from the grape to the wine glass. And if you sell it like that, I mean, that's an easy vision, right? And so we can go through financial services, we can go through energy. What can we uniquely solve with these set of blockchain technologies? And it's really ecosystem solutions.
You got me excited there with bait to plate. I was hoping all of them would. I was hoping they'd all rhyme, right? Mine to finger. Oh, that was a letdown. Like, mine to fine or something, but no, mine to finger. It makes sense. And very real, especially again, as you said, Internet of Value, the Internet of Things, which becomes more and more things as more and more is enabled and activated and given identities, and to just know. To be able to track that, to be informed by it, to help it make you decisions is so incredibly powerful. I mean, data continues to be really the new oil, and this just makes that much more oil/data for us to mine. Let's see. So I thank you for keeping going. And one of the things I was going to mention is that not only have I found inspiration and insight and guidance from the work that you've done, I've found it from you. You were an advisor to me and my co-founders at Symphony Ventures, which was outstanding. So thank you for playing that role for us. And clearly advising the world in a new and game-changing set of capabilities. So thank you, Dr. Mary Lassity, for being on my show.
I appreciate all the friends at Sykes, and thank you also to Jim for hosting today. He's behind the scenes, but there's a lot that goes on out there, folks, and Jim's helping.
Yeah, we figured out with technical challenges early on. So yes, Jim Raymer behind the scenes, keeping the wheels turning. So with that, everyone, thanks again for joining another One Take live links. One Take live on LinkedIn. There's too many L's in that. And thrilled to be coming to you. Hope everyone is healthy and safe around the world. We will put so many different links and notes in the show notes, referencing articles and books and research consortia. So please check that out after the show. And with that, Mary, thanks so much again, and take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.